This podcast series is sponsored by Havwoods, the prevailing name in beautiful wood flooring design. Gracing the surfaces of hotels, workspaces, private residences and more, Havwoods offers stunning wood flooring and cladding options in all conceivable colours and designs. Visit our showrooms today or contact us for more detail at havwoods.com/UK.
Hello and welcome to the Interior Design Business. My name is Jeff Hayward and we're recording this episode in front of a live audience at the Sofa.com showroom in Glasgow. I'm here today with my co-host, Susie Rumbold, Creative Director of Tessuto Interiors, past President of the British Institute of Interior Design, and the author of the Institute's A Client's Guide to Working with an Interior Designer. And that's great because today we're addressing the question of how do you find the right interior designer for your project?
Buying a designer interior is unlike any other purchase. It isn't, for example, like buying a red jacket. If I want a red jacket, I can spot one in a clothes shop, check the price tag and label, feel the fabric, admire the colour, look in the mirror to see that it fits me and looks good, pay for it and leave the store completely satisfied in under 10 minutes. But commissioning interior design is altogether more complicated. The client knows they have a project and a set of requirements, they have a budget figure in mind, they know when they want the project to end, and they may know what they like, but beyond that they have no idea what the finished product will be. For most people, that is a truly daunting prospect. The answer, of course, is to get professional help, but where can you go to find this wonderful person who truly gets you and will be able to give you the perfect product? And then, once you think you found them, how can you be certain that they will deliver? Let's find out. Welcome to the Interior Design Business.
So, to help us untangle this conundrum, we are joined by three very experienced professional designers: Jackie Fiskin of Ampersand Interiors, Nikki Emlich of NM Design, and well-known designer and broadcaster John Amabile. Welcome to the show, all of you. And Susie, I think you want to introduce them.
I was going to say, before we begin, I was hoping that perhaps each of you would be able to give us a brief introduction about yourselves and also your business. Jackie, do you want to kick that off and go first?
Yep. I'm Jackie Fiskin and I am Design Director of Ampersand Interiors, and we are based in Edinburgh and we also have a small showroom in London as well. We concentrate largely on residential interior design, and we do small hotels, commercial projects where largely people want something a bit more interesting. So that's us.
And John?
And I'm John Amabile, and I'm addicted to soft furnishings. I'm John Amabile, and I've been designing since about 1986. I started very young, and we concentrate on mostly residential small hotels, mostly in the west of Scotland, but we do travel. People probably recognise me from 60 Minute Makeover and other challenging design programmes on TV, where I've had to adapt my skills to make sure it's all broadcastable.
Hi everybody, I'm Nikki Emlich and I'm from NM Design. We're based in London and in Edinburgh. We have a small business that we work on largely residential projects like Jackie, but we do some nice commercial ones too. Some nice hotels, some nice bars, one in Glasgow. And yeah, that's basically what we do.
And I think you also do some work abroad too.
Oh, we do. We do lots of work abroad. Yeah, a lot of work in Cayman Islands for my sins, but we love that. We love that. We've been working in the Cayman Islands for 18 years, which is quite a long period. But yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Excellent. So we're going to kick off by, first of all, getting some definitions straight. So what actually is interior design? And what's the difference between interior design and interior decoration? Jackie, do you want to go first?
Interior design, for me, there's lots of different definitions, but for me it's taking an accurate brief from a client, developing a design concept that's good on both practicality and aesthetics. It's not just all about the look, it also has to work, and ideally bringing into budget. That's the challenge. And in terms of interior design and decorators, do you know, I think when I started out, which was over 35 years ago now, it was mostly interior decorators. And that's people who largely sell FF&E and are in procurement. These days, it's a hugely changed industry. And actually now there's so many technical aspects, plans, elevations, visuals, drawings. We're consulted on so many different aspects of the job. So yeah, I think it's hugely different. So I would say that's interior design, interior decorators maybe concentrate more on product. To me?
Anything to add to that, John?
Very much the same, and I think it's all in the interpretation. It just depends on when you get the client, how big the project's going to be. Is it purely decorative? Is it soft furnishings? Addiction again. Is it just curtains, maybe a feature wall? It depends on the size and the scale of the project. I would say determine whether it was a design project or whether it was decoration. For my money, my design background started in interior architecture, so I do start very early with architects to define spaces as well. So I'm from A to Z guy.
And what about you, Nikki? Do you find most people approach you for design first and then decoration?
Yes.
Or
yeah, absolutely. But I feel that we rarely do a project that doesn't see it through to the end. So many projects that we do, and I don't know about you guys, but there's very, very few projects that we deliver without adding the last candle detail, adding the last cushion detail, the artwork, you know, so there's all of that detail that finishes off the project to the latter, so the customer's really happy.
So
but including the interior architectural side as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's design first, decoration.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I always think that's one way of describing it is that interior designers decorate, but interior decorators don't necessarily design.
Yes.
Because it's the front end. Yeah. Anyway, so Nikki, what do you think are the advantages of why should people use an interior designer?
So many reasons, really. I would say cost effective. If you get a good interior designer that you really work with well, the cost effective value is huge because you won't make the mistakes. They'll guide you through all the intricacies of developing your project from start to finish, and they'll push you through your boundaries. You know, our clients will say to us, you know, you've taken me from this level to this level of like, I would never have gone down that route, but I love what I've had delivered. So I think there's lots of reasons why an interior designer, and also if you get the right one, if you get the right marriage of an interior designer, it's a partnership. I feel that you, 9 times out of 10, we become friends with them. I mean, it's crazy. We really do build friendships on the back of it. So we get the nice referral work from it, etc. But I just think working with an interior designer is really, really fun if you do get the right one.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think people are very budget conscious, and I always like to think that I'm helping people make expensive mistakes, or equally get them to see how they can get more bang for their buck. Say, definitely spend on this because it's worth it, it's going to be comfortable, it's going to last a lifetime. This is quite faddy, let's move that, but that might change in a couple of months. So again, it's about managing a project for longevity, and I'm not there to impose my personal style. It's to help people grow into the style and to evolve and explain what they like.
But saying that, John, would you say that a lot of people think interior design is just for rich people?
I think in the 80s when I started, yes, it was very elitist, and the decoration side in London, it was someone with a double-barreled name that could afford that lovely option to have someone help you out. But I think things have become much more affordable, much more accessible. You think of the amount of magazines on the shelves now, where it used to be mostly fashion. It's 50-50 with interior design. It's a huge industry now, and people are savvy. People with the likes of Pinterest and Instagram and watching podcasts, there's so much out there for them to see and to formulate their own opinion.
I wouldn't say it's rich people, but I would say that actually having an appropriate budget for the project is probably the key thing. So actually it doesn't have to be elitist, but actually as long as you know what you're trying to achieve on a budget, and that in itself is a reasonable target, then that's a good place to start.
Jackie, are there different types of interior designers? You know, if if I've got a project and I want to look for an interior designer?
Totally. There are lots of different types of designers. Some have a signature look, and you know exactly what you're going to purchase because they have a style, and actually there's maybe a security in that because you think, I love that style, I can buy that from that particular designer. Or there are a whole raft of designers who do a more bespoke service and will design for you. That's the sort of, as Ampersand, we don't have a signature style, so really we'll talk to our client, establish what that style is, offer suggestions, hopefully take them on a journey that incorporates their look. But yes, I think that's probably encompasses that.
And would you agree with that? Do you think that's the main difference?
Yeah, I would say that it's a bit like the Spice Girls. Do you like Baby Spice or do you like Sporty Spice? And I think, especially with some of the designers I've worked with on TV, and some of my TV contemporaries do have a specific style. And if you went to one designer in particular and you wanted a Rococo over-the-top look, that is what you're going to get. That's his distinctive look. And he's worked with that, and that works for him. But I think when you're looking for a designer, you have to think, yes, there's something about them. Is it their engaging personality? Obviously, their body of work. You must have seen something that has floated your boat, and then you go with them. For me, it's more about comfortability and the wow factor. And a bit of my background was working in television as well, so I had to design sets and used colours that would impact. And I want people to walk into a room and think, wow, I want it to have the wow factor. So I think, if anything, I give a sort of comfortability, but there's a few pings that would just make things go, not glitter like we were talking about earlier on. I'm not really a glitter person. Well, maybe at the weekends, if it's right for the client. I think for me, it's about getting it right for the client, and if I can bring along my comfortability with the wow factor, with the bang for your buck, I've done my job.
And looking at it from a client's perspective, Nikki, I mean, how important is it for the client to do their homework?
It's very important because, like what I was talking about earlier, it's a relationship, and it can be for quite a long period of time. So you've really got to be able to connect with someone who really understands you. We work on a philosophy of putting you into your home. I'm never going to live in your home. It's really, really important. But we have a certain style and we design a certain way. So yeah, I mean, getting the right designer is absolutely prime for you. And looking for someone who is, I think that goes back to styling again. I think, you know, what you talked about, Pinterest and so much imagery. I mean, when I started interior design, we were working out of the interior design book. There was no internet. So it was so much harder back in the day. Now it's just kind of everybody can be an interior designer, which is great. You know, everyone's got their own style and they want to adopt it. But how do you then narrow it down? And that's where a good interior designer that you will work with closely will guide you.
So on that basis, is Instagram a good place to find interior designers?
I think Instagram's a great place to find interior design inspiration because you can actually, it's so much better, as you were saying, when I started, it was design magazines and that was it. And actually finding that style, now you can really narrow down your interior design style and say, and also not every client is familiar with the language. So when they're describing what they want, actually knowing the words to describe that style. One of the first jobs when I started in interior design, I was told by a client that they wanted a really wow look. And a new book had come out by Zandra Rhodes, and it was geometric stripes, and it was orange, and it was turquoise. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really wow. But actually they hated it, absolutely hated it. And of course the thing is that, as my fellow designer told me, she said, but did you look at the rest of the house? It was a hint of peach. So a little bit of wow was actually probably...
Dark peach.
Yes, terracotta might have done it, but not my Zandra Rhodes collection. So actually knowing the language, Instagram's great for that, because Instagram you can identify a look really easily.
Is there a danger though that people will kind of think, oh, I might have that wall in that style and that wall in that style and that wall in that style? Because you're only ever seeing things in two dimensions effectively on Instagram.
I think the good thing about Instagram is we probably all spent a fortune on websites, features in magazines to set up a whole interior. We can equally very quickly log on 4 new looks that we did yesterday, and for people it is much easier for them to say, well, I quite like the lamps in that room, but I certainly don't want any monkeys, but I love lemon. So they can, that actually happened last week. but it allows people to see and say, well, I do like this, but I don't like that. And I had one client who said, you can do what you like in this room, but I must have a Champs-Élysées. I was like, Champs-Élysées. So we got there in the end, but it was by pointing.
So do you think, Nikki, that attractive photos can actually be a little bit misleading?
Spatial awareness, definitely. Size, you can look at a beautiful, we were looking at one recently with a client who said, I need this bedroom, I've got to have this, it's from Pinterest, it's so moody, it's so cool. But you haven't got that ceiling. It's really important, you haven't got the height. So it's really important to kind of look at it and be able to adapt that. Really understand that not necessarily that image can translate into the project that you're doing.
It's that 2D, 3D thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I also think that if someone's looking for a designer, the risk of just looking at an interiors photograph is it's not always obvious what the designer has done in that room.
Absolutely, and on Instagram, whether the designer actually did the interior being illustrated.
Yeah. So I think there are pitfalls for prospective clients unless they're careful.
It's a good place to start.
It's a great place to start. I agree. Yeah. What about recommendations from friends? Is that a good way? I mean, Nikki, you were saying that you get a lot of referral work from satisfied customers.
Entire business is based on recommendation, which is crazy. For years and years and years, I might not hear from someone for a few years. I can never change my phone number. It's got to stay the same. But it's literally, it comes back in cycles, which is so lovely. It's like, I know a friend of so-and-so that you did a project for. I love what you did. Can you come and do my house? Or it's a repeat client. So, yeah, really, really good. And obviously, if they're a good friend, they're never going to recommend you someone who's bad, right? They're always going to give you their story, their version, their variation, budgets, costings, delivery, installation. Did you over promise and under deliver, or vice versa? I always try to do the other. It's important, right?
But I think also, look, some clients, especially in my experience, have kept you as the best kept secret and they don't want to share you. So it's a bit like, I'm a bit too old to be a toy boy now, but I was always kept, are you going to be approaching any of my neighbours? And also it's like keeping up with the Joneses a little bit, and also people sometimes don't want to know what budget they've spent. So you have to be very careful with the recommendation system. It's great to be recommended by anyone, which is fantastic, but you have to be careful and respect people's privacy.
And I would have thought, working in friendship groups, you don't want to upset somebody who's the friend of a really good client.
But it's quite nice as a designer as well. We've had loads of work for recommendation and groups of friends. But also, that when that person comes to you, this new client that's been recommended, they also don't want to upset their friend by being a client from hell. So actually, it's quite nice as the designer that the client wants to work with you, and from the designer, that you've been recommended and it was a good experience and a positive experience, and there's almost a shorthand that actually it's been good. So let's start on that basis.
So I guess the recommendation that you'd make for anyone out there that's actually looking for an interior designer is ask around. Absolutely. See who else their friends have used. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so are there any lists of interior designers that clients can consult online?
Absolutely. I would head straight to the BIID, who have recommendations of designers, and all those designers have been vetted by the organisation to ensure that they are competent to carry out their job, they've got the correct insurance, they know what they're doing. So you actually know from the outset that that's a really good place to start. So.
Okay. Now, Susie, I'm going to ask you as the author of the client guide, anything else that people might consult?
The client guide. It's on the BIID website, so you can just download it as a PDF if anyone is interested or wants to. And actually, how many people in the audience are actually designers? Most of you, I'm guessing. So if you, it's a great thing to actually give to your clients. You can give it to them, when you sign the contract or before you sign the contract, and just say, this is something from the BIID, and it just talks about, how collaborative the process is and how you should work together with your designer. It's a useful document. Yeah.
Got the plug out the way.
There we go. Hurrah. So, how should the client go about working out what sort of designer they need? So, and by this, what I'm really getting at is, I've got a project, I want to do so many rooms and I've got this much to spend. How do they know at a practical level the best person to talk to if they're shortlisting 2 or 3?
I think if you initially get a feeling from someone that they understand where you're living and how you live, and they think of the function of each room, because it could be somebody downsizing, they're bringing a lot of furniture with them, which, to be honest, is not one of our favourite things to do, because it's much more problematic and a bit more time consuming to make sure that that maybe beloved grand piano is going to go in this new look. So I think it's, if someone's talking your language, you know, as again, finding out the function and where they're going and understanding, and even just having a conversation about things you like, you get a vibe from somebody if it's someone that you get on with, and that's really important, because you are in and out of their house for 6 months to a year, and even through COVID, a couple of years when projects stopped and started. So you're part of the family for quite some time, so it's important you get that relationship right.
Jackie, have you got anything
Can't
to
beat
add
a
to that?
face-to-face appointment. Face-to-face appointment, actually go meet people, speak to them, talk about how they work, find out, go on their website. Most people will say the services they provide. You'll see images of the projects and the products that they've provided. And actually, yes, speaking to somebody and actually saying, you know, it's quite a personal relationship as well. You talked about the duration of it, but I remember one client telling me that actually she found it really quite awkward. She wanted to tell me that she wanted a double-ended bath. You know, another lady told us that she wanted to keep quite a bit away from her husband in bed. They'd been married for so long, clearly. And I was just, you know, you get to know all the details of people's families, and actually,
What they keep in their bedside cabinets. And
Exactly. And what size of pasta? One lady wanted her cupboards designed to hold extra large bottles of Coke. I mean, you know a lot about these people, so actually make sure you get on with your designer.
Some designers claim to offer services that they might be unable to deliver. How do you think clients can protect themselves against or this type of designer?
I would say go on their website. Have they done similar projects that show those services being done? Talk to them about how they handled it. You know, just try and gauge a bit of information about them. What services do they employ in-house? Do they have interior architects? What are their qualifications? Just find, again, institutes like the BIID will tell you. They'll have been accredited. They'll know whether they're able to carry out these services.
Have you ever found yourself in a project where you've thought, this client is asking me to do something that I can't actually do?
Usually by that time, I'm off. No, I think it's important for any designer to realise their own capabilities, and I certainly wouldn't want to overstretch or overpromise, and indeed make a mistake with someone else's money. So unless I can come to the party with the right tools for the job, and equally have the right tradesmen to know that I can bring my team with me, then there's no point in us going any further. If it's basically an architectural shell with very little inside, but architectural inside spaceshipness, as I call it, then that's not for me.
How about you, Nikki?
But I think there's the specialists that you bring on board as well as a company. It doesn't end with you, or it starts with you. Obviously, you bring your client into your circle and your network. But you know, I do heavily rely on the specialists that we work with, time and time again, because they prove their worth also. So it works that way.
And I think there might be a misconception about what interior designers actually do, and particularly some of the TV shows.
We're not builders.
You're not artists, you're not upholsterers.
That's right,
you know,
that's right.
You get people in to do those things.
Yeah, you kind of get drawn into the web of, you know, you're a magician. No, you're not. I'm not a fairy. But it is true. You know, you're kind of expected to do quite a lot. Like you said earlier with the question, you have to know yourself and own that and say, you know what, I don't know that, but I know someone who does. And I think that network of people is super important.
And I guess the way you convey that to the client is really important. Do you know so how do you go about conveying your competency? You know, you're in that first meeting, you're having that first telephone call. How do you give the prospective client confidence that you can deliver?
I suppose just by the ability, you know, we've all been in business for quite some time, so we've likely tackled similar projects, and you can talk through them and explain how they were handled and the process they'll go through, and just try and reassure them, and perhaps show images of projects that you've done, not on the phone call obviously, but direct them to your website and say, you know, this, in this particular project we tackled something similar in this way. And I think then hopefully you're able to reassure people.
And then once they've narrowed down their choice, you know, they've done all their homework and they've got maybe a short list, what should the client do next?
They'll always ask the very important question, how much is this going to cost me? So that is when you get into the area of how much time is required for the job, what is their budget, how can you manage it? And for me, I always try it and take it through a phase where you're showing the initial presentation to get everybody on board, and then you can start apportioning some finances and times and budgets to things. So I think from anybody meeting a design for the first time, they should see, let's get on board with the look and the design, which can be fine-tuned, but how's this going to work? Where do you come in? Do we just get the board and come back and turnkey and it's finished? Or site management, quality checking? So it's about creating what you could call maybe a soft contract so that they will understand. And I think once everything's laid out, and I think it's important to ask what people's expectations of you are as well. If in doubt, I always prefer to ask the question and let them tell me what they expect from me first, and then I can go in and over-deliver.
In the time-honoured fashion. But do you think clients generally, when they pick up the phone in that first phone call, they don't really understand what you're going to give them?
Yes, frequently. I don't think people, especially if you've never used an interior designer before, you don't know the process. And I think being able to actually talk someone through, this is how we work. We've got a document that we send out to all prospective clients. This is how we work, and this is what you'll get at each stage of the way. And this is, you know, what you can expect. And no, we won't provide you with one scheme, and if you don't like it, that's tough. Because I think lots of people worry that actually by engaging an interior designer, what happens if they don't like it? So we just talk them through that and how it might work, and the professionals that'll be involved, and what's expected of them at each stage as well. So I think being upfront about that is really good. And, you know, questions are good. If people ask the question, we can answer them and hopefully reassure them.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think that's where the questionnaire comes into it as well, to send a questionnaire to your client and really get in under the structure of their homes, their lives, the animals that they have, the kids that they're planning to have, you know, the whole future proof in their home is really, really important. So I think all that is really helpful.
And throughout that process, Nikki, you're building empathy as well, aren't
Yeah,
you?
absolutely.
You're understanding what
Totally.
the client emotionally wants.
Yes, it's an emotional journey for both client and designer.
Well,
definitely.
especially if you're doing someone's home.
Yeah,
Less
it's
so
emotional
commercial
journey,
work, but
totally.
It's so personal.
Very personal.
And sometimes it's difficult working with a couple and you get on with one of them more than the other and you think you're siding with them, or oh, for goodness sake, don't tell Malcolm how much those cushions were. You know, from that point of view, and again it gets back to the sort of marriage guidance, you have to manage, without marriage guidance, their relationship through the design process as well. So there is a little bit of, I won't say underhand, I'll say attention to psychology sometimes to find what works with people.
Yes, it is. No one ever told me that I had to be a psychologist first before it. No one ever let us know that, did they?
I'm sure I tried to work myself out.
In that sort of scenario, who is the decision maker?
Mm-hmm. I think that's, and again, sometimes it can come down to money and the sort of makeup of the couple and how they've come to the fact. Sometimes it's one part of the couple want the service and the other one think, oh, I think you do a perfectly good job yourself, but darling, why do we need him? So you've got, it's like you kind of got to prove yourself as well. So it's prove your worth and prove it's worthwhile them seeing the value of what you're bringing to the party.
It's easier commercially, because commercially there's usually someone who's responsible for the project. But in a marriage, you can't really ask the husband and wife, who's going to make the decision? Because that's a really sort of difficult one to get across.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have to sort of feel your way quite sensitively through that, and just sort of, we've had clients where the husband may want to do something really bold and contemporary, and the wife may want to do something really traditional. And actually you have to tread a line, because if you go sometimes down the middle, that's not going to work for either of them. So you have to really plot your path quite carefully.
And you have to be comfortable enough that you can take some chances and throw in the Zandra Rhodes cushion throw in something that's a little bit out of the ballpark, out of the whole look of the project, because that's you taking them one step further.
That's what they want you on board for, surely. You know, they need you there to push them, definitely.
And Nikki, you mentioned that you produce a questionnaire, you send a questionnaire to prospective clients. Would it be a good idea for prospective clients to actually come to you with a written brief?
Oh, it'd be amazing. It's very rare that we get one of them. What's one of those? I can't even tell you how many times I've literally written a brief.
As a piece of advice to people looking for interior designers, would it be a good idea for them to jot some notes down?
100%.
And what should they include? What are those key things that they should be talking about?
Future-proofing their home is a really big one for me, because we don't want the here and now is great, but actually, you know, if you don't talk about the family that you're going to plan to have, or, you know, if you're going to be there, it's not your forever home. You know, what does that look like in your costs, your budgets? You know, kind of how far you're going to take it. All those things are really important.
So many of those are really political decisions for a couple.
Yeah. True.
I'm amazed if some of these projects don't end up actually in divorce or separation.
Yeah,
Sometimes they do.
They sometimes do, yeah, it's true. It's true.
And then you've got to help them readdress what's going where. Well,
Yes.
that would be lovely, but he's got the dining table, I've got the chairs.
I think the biggest part of all that is, as a designer, you're in there for to get the fun into it. You've got to make lighthearted of that. So when they do go into that kind of structure of arguing over it, you're trying to mobilise that very, very quickly. I think that's really important.
There's usually a path. There's usually a line where, as the designer, that's what they're paying us for. You're paying us for to show you the way through this maze and to pull a cohesive whole together. And so actually you just have to find that path, and then hopefully you hope that both parties will agree that this is a good route to go down.
Is it reasonable, do you think, for the client in that first phone call to say to the designer, how much are you going to charge me?
That's always the most difficult thing. I actually started saying, are you aware of, on a building site, what a structural engineer does, or a quantity surveyor? They will look at the project in its entirety and show you bit by bit how much the project could cost. But sometimes, and more often than not, if you visit a house and it's just maybe a small element of one room, it's not a whole design service, where you can't really charge a whole fee for the whole room. So I actually say, I'll base it on what I think my time spent in each area. And I think they think then they're getting more value for money. There's no point in charging a whole room when I'm only choosing the sofas, the chairs, the throws, maybe a feature wall, a couple of lamps, when you're not taking it back to the bones. But I think when people get an understanding that you understand their project, then you can then go into say, well, I'm X amount for this, for design proposal is that, this is the management side. If you want to come and dress this, right down to, as you were saying, the candles. I mean, the amount of people said, oh, do you actually do cups and saucers? We do the whole package. We want you to, I don't want to do something beautiful and you walk in with something from a large DIY store. Excuse me, from another, or many other stores are available. You know, and they could bring something in that completely ruin the whole look. So you want to know that you can give them that full service, but it's the $1 million question that everyone wants to know. How much is this going to cost me? You can tell them their wallpaper is X amount a roll and they'll need 6 rolls. That's there. But this invisible design service is what scares people.
But the fee is it's the interesting one. It's a reasonable question to ask how much it's going to cost, but you can't possibly answer it that first appointment, and I'd be quite upfront about that. So we always do an appointment with the client, and you know, we discuss the brief, and once you know, you have an idea about what the client wants, you're able more to put a fee on that. Now that's just the design, but also the client wants to know how much the project's going to cost. So then comes the slightly more difficult discussion, because people don't always want to tell you how much they want to spend. They might, partly because they always think we're going to spend it, which is actually not the truth, but also because they might not know and they don't want to embarrass themselves by putting in a ridiculously low figure or a ridiculously high figure. So there's an element of trust in all of that as well. But actually knowing we try and advise a client, give based on their brief what we think the project will cost. But obviously not, if they choose a fabric at £200 a metre or a fabric at £20 a metre, that will hugely affect the cost.
Do you separate out the design fees from everything else?
Yes, absolutely.
And Nikki, how do you deal with a question from the client when they ask you, how much is it going to cost me?
How long's a piece of string? Literally, and it's so difficult because every project's a bespoke project, right? So you go into their home or they come and see you and they've got some sort of an idea what they want. It's the time, it's the detail, it's the other specialists on board. It's the things that they don't even know what they want at that point. So when you start throwing figures at them too early, all of a sudden you're making false promises. You can't do that because they're going to hold you to it down the line and say, well, you told me it's going to cost this and it's now costing me this. So we're really, really honest with that. We're straightforward. This is what it's going to cost you. Once we've got down the line of the brief, we've really got it kind of concreted, and we say, we've got to be careful with this.
I think that's really interesting, the whole managing expectations side.
100%.
As a designer, you don't want to overpromise something that they can't possibly afford.
Absolutely.
That's the trap, is that the first number you give them is the only number they ever remember.
They'll always remember it.
The only number.
Exactly. You have to be super careful with that.
So do you give like a range? John, do you give a range of prices that it could possibly be?
I think I always try to meet people in their home for the first meeting, and without being too nosy, I kind of gauge and see the value of what they've spent, because that gives me a kind of worth in their expectation. If I know that they bought these ready-made curtains from a high street store, then I know their expectation of how much that element of the project is going to be. So I won't be going for a bespoke, double width, bumper lined, huge headings or whatever to enhance or create a new look. Again, it's about managing the expectations, and there's nothing worse than showing someone something and they can't afford it. So that I think that avoids any embarrassment by sort of assessing who they are before they even start to talk about money, and then you in your mind then think, well, you could probably take them to that area, save some money in that area. And I think it's about man management as well, and a little bit of a psychology again. And again, you never want to over-deliver or over-promise. And equally in the last 4 or 5 years, I said, this is the design concept now. If you come back to me in 2 months' time, I may have to change one element of this because it's no longer available. I can't get it for 2 years. You're trying to do it within this time scale, so that's going to change things. And I think explaining the flexibility and then lets them understand the amount of detailed time that you are actually spending on their job.
But what's really interesting, what John said there is absolutely right, but this is how this industry is so diverse. I've been to visit a client that lives in a caravan at that point because they've bought the land, they're evolving as a couple, they're getting stronger, more powerful to be able to spend the money. And how do you judge it from there? There's nothing to judge. So you're just back to the psychology again, which is interesting.
We've developed again, been in business for a long time now, and so you have a gut feeling about how much a project is going to cost, and you are able to guide a client and give indications of cost. Not, it's very hard because you try so hard not to be caught and trapped by that initial, as you say, that first figure. But again, that's where experience comes in, and you are able to sort of indicate an approximate budget and have that initial conversation. It doesn't mean you have to spend that budget, because if someone comes back and says, oh, well, I haven't got that, then you are able to tell them what they can achieve for that. But at least that conversation has started and you're managing it.
It's not just the budget either, it's also the time. I mean, what do you do if a client comes to you and how do you tell them that what they're asking for is impossible, that it will not be possible to renovate this 5-bedroom, 4-story house by next week?
Well, that's a frequently asked question, unfortunately. But You try and tell them what you can achieve for that. And if it's impossible, then it's something that you said earlier, then we just have to walk away, because you don't want to promise you can do something, because then the client is obviously going to be disappointed. And also you're going to give yourself an absolute nightmare trying to pull it off. So yeah, we wouldn't do that. But we would be quite upfront about what was possible, what they can achieve, and do our best to pull together something that approximates the original brief.
I mean, sadly, I worked on something called 60-Minute Makeover, which was, it's the question I'm asked all the time. Do we do it in 60 minutes? And yes, we did. It was 2.5 hours as live. However, there was 40 people there. Everything was on a conveyor belt. It was a quick fix. I wouldn't go too close onto maybe some of the finishes. We didn't use any oil-based paints because they can't dry in the time. So for the look and for the 60 minutes, yes, it worked. But again, that has actually muddled up people's imagination of how quickly things can be done. And for a quality product and project, things take time.
Totally.
And we're talking about another aspect of the relationship, I suppose, trust. And the client has to trust you and believe the advice you're giving.
Absolutely. I think it's hugely important. And that's back to how you engage them. You have to meet them and you have to speak to them, and you have to be able to transmit that you are able to carry out the job and reassure them. And yes, and be able to talk to them. It's not an easy job and it's not an easy process. And if someone is going to knock 7 bells out of your house, you want to know that you can actually speak to that person. They will be there. They'll scoop you up when you're crying because the colour's gone up on the wall and it's so blue, and we'll hold your hand and say, just wait for everything else to go in, because it's going to work, it's going to look great, but it's going to listen to your anxieties and just be there for you.
And there's not a project that we've ever done that hasn't got to that stage where the colour on the wall is like, I'm having a panic attack, this colour is way too dark. And then when they get it finished, it's like, wow, this is amazing. So it's a process.
I think that's one of the hardest things in the project management side, especially if they're living in the home or they're visiting it every day, is they're seeing things half done and they don't see the full picture. And 100 times out of 100 at the end they say, I see what you mean now. Yes. But taking them through that and then say, I'll be round in an hour. You've just got to be calm. When this, you'll only see a bit of this because half of the wall will be covered with this. That colour will need to come through. Please trust me. And that's when you find that's the huge personal side of things, that they don't probably think that you'll have to go into that level of intimacy.
I think one of the problems is that domestic clients often will only do one big project in their life. It's for a lot of couples. I mean, you do get people that have many homes and do it over and again, but often it's a once in a lifetime thing. So in a way, once a project's gone, it's gone. And if the client, if you've lost the project because the client actually hasn't believed what you've told them, is there anything you can do about that? Have you ever have you ever lost a job because the client wouldn't listen?
I think if at any time if you and the client have a misunderstanding and there's a loss of
This is at the beginning, though, not through. This is again right at the beginning. This
and
piece
you
where you lose it because they want it done in 3 months and they want it done for 100 grand, and it's going to cost 400 grand and take a year.
Is it something I want to salvage?
You want it because the difficulty of actually pulling that off. If a client isn't hearing a realistic time frame and a realistic budget, we can't take it on.
So you actually count yourselves lucky.
Oh
actually.
Gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm interested in all the anxiety issues you must face during a project. It must be absolute hell for you.
Well, it's emotional for us as well, because as a creative, we're very emotional beings. Is that right? So you take things. You are sensitive souls. We take things personally. You have to really learn to kind of grow a rhinoceros skin. It's hard though. It's hard because you do take things personally. So we're a little bit like chefs, I guess. We just like to be loved, right?
And every designer wants their client to love the project.
Yes, absolutely.
I want my clients to walk in and go, "Wow, that's amazing."
No,
so
we'll do. Life.
Yes, that's the nicest thing anyone can ever say to you. Is you changed my life.
Very few would say, "I'm just in it for the work. I'm just doing this, and I'm just going to walk away. I don't care if you don't like it." That just doesn't happen. It's I don't know anybody who designs that way.
No, absolutely.
And it does affect your own confidence as well and your self-belief. I mean, we've all been doing this for more than 10 years, so you realise that you have to have the courage of a conviction and think, that's what I thought, that's what I'm going with. But sometimes you're halfway through and they're putting doubt in your mind thinking, have I really lost the plot this time? Did Sporty Spice not want those stripes? So it's having the courage of your convictions to stay with things as well. And go back and say, no, you've paid for this service. This is what I'm giving to you. Please let me deliver this for you. You're going to love it.
And a really big anxiety must be you thinking, does the client actually have the funding to actually see this project through?
That's always established. We never embark on a project until costs have been discussed up front. Everybody knows what it's going to cost. There's the horror that maybe they didn't have the money and they've committed to it. I mean, we've not had that, touch wood, but I mean, I'm sure it could happen. But a client will never know. Will never embark on a project not knowing what it's going to cost. Now, obviously, we've not got X-ray eyes. If you lift a floorboard and you find dry rot, as happened to us in a project last week, there's nothing we could have done about that. But I'd like to think that most sensible clients would actually have a little bit of a buffer for something like that.
And that designers should recommend a contingency too,
yeah,
surely.
no, absolutely. So, because something like that is just a nightmare.
you can't
beyond that.
But that goes back to being you're not a builder.
Yes.
It just goes back to you're not a one-size-fits-all. So
I'm a designer, not a
You're
magician.
a designer, you're part of the process, you're not all of the process. It's so important.
But in the knowables, they will know exactly what it's going to cost before it starts.
Should clients expect designers to give them sample schemes before employing them?
No, I think by that time they should have a trust with you, that they have an expectation, and you can see from their catalogue of works that exchange will come in the first stage when you're doing the design proposal for them, and then they're engaging in something you've prepared for them. But I don't think anyone should be working for free. It's a design process.
Interestingly, when I started 30 years ago, there was no internet. There was possibly an argument for it then, because a client was employing you without maybe knowing exactly what your style was, what you could do. And so perhaps there might have been an argument then. I think now with the internet and most designers' catalogue, whether you've been in magazines or whatever, you can see that the designer is competent. So there should be no necessity to actually prove your ability before being engaged, I would say.
We have put a proposal together though for some larger packages, because we've been asked to be competitive with other designers, so we might want to win the project. So we would just put a concept proposal, but we work quite hard at that. That can take a few days, and we go the extra mile because we want to win the contract. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts.
There's also the fee proposal. So when you're tendering for a project, you're going to be up against other designers, presumably. So how do you decide what to actually put in your fee proposal?
We try to put everything. We try to include everything, right down to the latter of the procurement of product. And then there's the tender area of how much do you give your client of any discounts, if you get any discounts anyway. That's always a really, really good thing to kind of win a little bit trust back. So that unfortunately in our world of design, that really does go a long way. It goes part and package of the trust. If they think, you're working with a brand, Tom Dixon, Andrew Martin, whatever, they like to think that they're just getting a little bit of something back if they're going to go with you as a designer. And that's how we kind of work. I don't know about you guys, but just give them a little bit of something back.
But if the client has gone out to 3 designers and has said, this is the brief, this is the brief, this is the brief, and got 3 different fee proposals back from 3 individual designers, you 3 for example, for the same job, and the numbers at the bottom of that page are vastly different, what questions should the client be asking to drill down and actually understand what's been quoted for? Because clearly they're not going to be like for like.
No. But there are many ways to skin a cat, and companies charge in different ways. So you have to ask them how they're charging and what services they're providing.
So how have you calculated this? What have you included for?
Absolutely. And some will have included, you know, if we're doing bathrooms, there'll be visuals, there'll be elevations, there'll be all sorts of things included in that. And somebody else has maybe put together a wee presentation. So it's very, very important to find out what it is that designer's providing for you, so that you can assess the fees and you can assess what you're being charged for. So simply, I would say you contact each designer, you find out what's included, what's not included. I'd like to think the fee proposal does include and sort of state all these things, but yeah, everyone works slightly differently, so it's important.
And I think the more vague it is, the more of a red flag it is to a client, because if they don't see a true breakdown of everything that you're trying to do, and we even do it to the number of days it's going to take us sometimes. Not that we work on just an hourly rate in that way, but because obviously there's got to be a contingency there of time and time running over, but it's a true transparency.
It depends who the client is. I mean, if it's a builder or a private client, completely different, because they'll be offsetting costs in different ways that you don't even know about, thinking about reuse further down the line. So I try and base every fee proposal on a particular client based on that project, and really that's the only way to do it.
Do you think clients expect interior designers to prepare a contract for them to sign?
I think in this day and age they do, and I certainly wouldn't attempt to do a project without it. Because it's a safety net for everyone.
Yes, for the client as much as for us. The client needs to know what's included, what they're going to get for their money, you know, how long the process is going to last, how many visits, etc., etc. And we need to know anything that's not in that contract isn't included, and that should be a flag to anyone that actually, you know, and it is a way to differentiate between different designers as well. You know, so you asked about the fee earlier, and how do you judge what's in, you know, if one is low and the other is high. How can you tell the difference? That contract should say, and it should highlight these things.
I think what we were saying about with the red flag, any designer that's just happy to take a basic brief, run with it, not give you true figures, but give you a guideline of figure with no contract, you'd run a mile from, definitely.
Shall we give a round of applause? I think that's been brilliant. Now we're going to open up the floor to questions. So would anybody like to ask our panellists here a question? We do have a roving mic, I believe, so stick your hand in the air if you've got a question.
Hi, Nikki made a good point earlier about future-proofing houses. I wanted to ask, there was a very good podcast in the series about designing for the third age. It's one of my favourites. And I wondered, with an ageing population, are people starting to consider more how they design the house to be adaptable for later life?
Definitely. I'm actually doing it myself for a project that we're doing in Edinburgh right now, thinking about bedrooms on ground floors and how that adapts into bathrooms. But yeah, definitely, of all elements of future-proofing and obviously energy and sustainability, and we could go down a rabbit hole with all of that. But yeah, definitely.
That could also be quite a political conversation though, John, if you know that you've got to design for that and the client thinks they might still be 30 or 40 and in fact they're 60 or 70.
Be honest.
Well, how do you deal with that?
Again, it's building the relationship where they will take your advice. And I always turn things around and say, in my experience, and I'm usually a lot older than, if I'm a lot older than I'm saying, in my experience, my first apartment had a spiral staircase upstairs into a bed platform, which was great. But now in my late 50s, where I'm up during the night researching different things, I didn't want to be going up and down the spiral staircase all the time. So I'm future-proofing myself, so please take my advice. I'm thinking about your longevity. It could be guests coming to stay with you, building houses or rooms in the garden for maybe relatives that can come and stay, or if they have to have, care. It's a big, big different world out there when you're considering a design concept now.
Have there been things that you've thought about the client hasn't thought about?
Oh, frequently, because actually that's what we said earlier. You get to know your clients really well, and you find out how many children they've got, the dog, do they want to wash the dog on the way into the house? It's the question, it's part of your job. You just have to ask the questions about how they want to use the space, and then whether it is future-proofing them or whether it's thinking about the kids and all the clutter they come in with from school, and you actually just do not want it left in a pile at the front door. And it's just that's just part of the job.
Has there been anything that you've ever not been told in a brief, but you found out midway through a project that suddenly you've got to design for? Nikki, you're nodding to that one.
Yeah, lots of times. Again, going back to the brief, there's very few projects that we've ever delivered where there has been a true identity to a brief. I don't know about you guys, but it is absolutely, we start off here and we work it out ways. But you get right down and they need a cinema room. They've decided, they've just seen something on Pinterest that they've seen that weird girl, that they've been to some amazing hotel, they've been travelling and they've just got to have it. So yeah, that happens a lot.
I usually find that once you start a project, it can sometimes start quite small, and then once everyone gets comfortable with each other, it suddenly grows arms and legs, and actually that can be a shame, because often they'll start with maybe the principal room in the house, where actually they really would have gone, all bells and whistles and everything, and so that was their big spend, but then think actually that worked out quite nice, and so you end up with other rooms, and then because then they know what you can really do, but actually we could have done much more with that first room, but everyone was still finding their feet.
So they get bolder as the project continues.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely, your clients evolve with you. Yeah, they come on a journey with you, and they learn from you, and they become more confident in their own taste. It's a lovely thing, to watch.
It's really nice.
You do have to try and get that information up front as soon as possible, so that you're not making critical changes further down the line. When Ellie comes home from college and she's been away for 3 months and her tuppence worth gets put in, and then you're having to maybe be like a school teacher trying to design by committee, which is the worst thing that you want, because it goes in all different directions and people lose confidence in what they've said.
Right, one final question from me. What is the oddest, most unexpected thing you have ever been asked to design?
I'll jump in on that one. I once had a wonderful gentleman who came to me and said he wanted his bedroom done up as a tart's boudoir, which I thought was fabulous. So it was a wonder. It was a brief that I didn't expect.
Did he have a tart to put in his boudoir?
I don't think his inclinations ran in that direction, but it was wonderful. We used a Timorous Beasties wallpaper, a fabulous wallpaper called Oriental Orchid, and it's the most beautiful paper, and it's got a red orchid going up it, but overlaid on that in gloss is a ménage à quatre, I think. I always tried to count the people, but you could only see it if you looked at it at certain angles. So it was beautiful, and we paired it with a fabulous bed. I'd like to think it was the most tasteful tart's bed boudoir that he maybe hadn't seen, but it was a good one.
Yeah. And John, have you designed anything weird? Anything you've been asked?
Keeping it clean.
You don't have to keep it clean. Just
Certainly on 60 Minute Makeover, I was asked to do quite a few surprising things because it did have a surprise element. But I think in the real world, I think I was doing a nice house out in Bothwell, a nice part of Glasgow, and the wee girl was quite into Bratz at the time, a bit like Spice Girls in doll fashion, and I had been asked to make a chair for the room, and she wanted a high fake fur slipperette chaise. And we did. I got one of the props guys at Scottish Television to make it for me. It probably wouldn't have passed any British kite standard thing. There's quite a lot of glue gun. It was safe enough, but I think that's probably the only one I can talk about in public.
I have one. A basement nightclub on Oxford Street years ago. The guy wanted us to design like a pulley cord system for the champagne to be delivered to the tables. It was the cheesiest thing I've ever seen, but we did it. We did do it.
That is weird. Susie, you've got to share your story.
Okay, so the weirdest thing I was ever asked to design was a colonic irrigation suite. We'd done beauty treatment rooms up in Hampstead, Belsize Lane, in a mews, and some more space became available and the client decided he wanted to put in a colonic irrigation suite. So for about 3 months, I became the world authority on delivering water to a patient at exactly 37 degrees centigrade from any distance.
I'm sure that's coming useful.
You win.
Totally, hands down.
Wonderful. Well, a round of applause. I think it's been fantastic. I'd like to thank you, Jackie, John, and Nikki. Brilliant conversation. Really enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed it too. And thank you to sofa.com for hosting us here today in Glasgow. Brilliant showroom. You should all come and visit if you're listening or watching. And a final thank you to you, our audience. You've been terrific. We do hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please do get in touch on our social channels. We're at Interior Design Business Pod, and please share any feedback that you like. The Interior Design Business is a Wildwood Plus production. Thank you very much for listening.